Therapists of Reddit, what was your biggest I know I'm not supposed to judge you but holy sh*t moment? It's not often I get to talk about my profession, but here goes. I was working at a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center and had a client come in who was a self-proclaimed drug lord. As we worked together, he told me about his history. Included in this history was how he got to where he was currently at. During the conversation, this man admitted to selling his sister into sex slavery, forcibly injecting her with several sedatives and narcotics, and having several people teach her a lesson. What this meant, he never shared. He told this story with a blank face, smiling only when he recalled the good times, which he referred to as times when he had enough heroin to get through the day. I'm not sure where he is at now, but this man inspired me to work with victims of sex trafficking, because not only do they deal with the stigma of selling their bodies, they often manage drug addictions. People would honestly be floored if they realized how many people were addicted to chemicals that they were forcibly given. Lots of people discussing pedophilia as an example of the toughest stuff to not judge despite our training. I haven't yet treated a pedophile, thankfully. At least not an identified one. I did run a men's anger management group though, and some of those men had done some terrible things to women. Most of them I found ways to like and admire for their positive aspects, but there were two guys in that group I just could never find unconditional positive regard for. One guy basically never spoke in group. He would give one-word answers and occasionally just discuss how unfair the system was to him. I worked really hard to open him up and find things to connect over, but he never opened up to me or the group. He left the group after he strangled his girlfriend and went to jail. She survived, thankfully. The other left group early routinely, showed up late, participated minimally and similarly never wanted to open up honestly. He left early one group after we had discussed him staying to the end and threatened me when I told him he wasn't going to get credit for attendance, something the court required. Oddly, I eventually moved into the apartment below him, completely without knowledge, and listened to him scream at his girlfriend and break shit while I called the cops. I judge these men. They're shitty. Maybe they're redeemable, but redemption requires self-exploration and they both refuse to do so. It's worth noting how differently I felt about them than so many others in the group, men I found ways to help and admire and respect even in spite of their awful behavior in the past. Not a licensed therapist but a behavioral health technician, basically, means I got a psych degree. I was trained in behavioral intervention techniques for children and was off helping coach parents to support children with behavior disorders. I'll say this, I rarely encountered a child that had a clear mental illness in the same way as when I worked with adults with serious mental illness. In many ways, they were visibly confused or lonely. Given that most of their parents were suffering from poverty, alleviating the burdens of being poor would have likely mitigated the most severe symptoms of many of the children. Advocating for affordable childcare and livable minimum wages is mental health advocacy. I found myself judging, not the children, but their parents. Some parents would drop the kids off with me and peace out with a, fix my kid attitude. As a parent, now, I get some of it, exhaustion and burnout are real. But the best I could do in that situation was provide that kid with an hour-long vision of what it looks like to live in a loving, structured environment. Those kids were the ones I could tell who were much more likely to be subject to the system for the duration of their lives. Either cycles of institutionalization and homelessness or prison. When a concerned parent showed up and asked, "How do I help my kid?" I practically jumped for joy for the child because they had someone who loved them and was fighting for them. Agreed hard. I was talking to a friend about my recent therapy session, and she very wisely pointed out that she thought my therapist was a great fit, because she challenges you. I asked what she meant, and she talked about a mutual, now ex, friend who was also going to therapy, whose therapist was more of a buddy to complain to instead of working through your problems. Turns out, the friend had proudly divulged that one session, they didn't like the questions the therapist asked, so instead of interacting, they spent the entire rest of the session staring out the window and full-on stonewalling the poor lady. I never knew that, and made me really WTF. You're wasting your money, and the time of the both of you if you don't just go headfirst into the situation. Therapists, good therapists, love helping solve your problems and listen to you to understand why things are going wrong. I personally think it was kind of shitty for my friend's therapist to let them get away with that kind of behavior, but there was a clear pattern of weaponizing their own emotions against people who cared about them, so I wasn't surprised. If my therapist even smells I'm downplaying or telling half-truths, she stops everything she's doing to weasel it out of me, lol. I'll go through 4 or 5 good enough answers for why I'm feeling before I finally say whatever the real reason is, not because I'm being intentionally obstinate, but I have a habit of doing it that's hard to break, or I need a moment to pause and really think on the reason. We really do play a verbal game of her trying to catch my Weasley ass in a half-lie, lol. That ability to push back on me until I give up the ghost is the reason my therapy has been so goddamn successful, as well as my own work put in to actively try to be as open as possible to the process. It fucking blows. Nobody likes being upset or going to those really hard emotional places, but it has to be done. Not allowing that for yourself in the presence of a neutral third party will be a detriment to your journey. When I was a teenager, I lived in a very emotionally and mentally abusive household. I know people don't take that stuff seriously, but it was so bad that I was later diagnosed with PTSD from a psychiatrist. Anywho, my abusive parents and I got in a verbal fight in the car. My stepdad stopped the car and told me, "Get out, we're leaving you on the highway." I wasn't scared because I knew I could just call the police, say I was an abandoned child, and they'd get in loads of trouble, so I said sounds good and got out. My mom then came out and started attacking me. I refused to get back in the car after the attack, so my stepdad got out, dragged me by the hair, called me a bipolar bitch, and threw me in. They made me see a therapist. They told her that I jumped out of a moving car and then I attacked my mom when she was trying to help. This therapist didn't believe anything I said and tried getting me to take bipolar meds. I knew I wasn't bipolar, I was being abused, and I knew that the anger and sadness I felt was normal for my situation. She glared at me and said, "You're not nearly as smart as you think you are." I refused to say a word in any of our therapy sessions after that. I would just go in, sit down, and she'd make snarky, sarcastic remarks for a few minutes then dismiss me. She wasn't trying to help me, she was trying to help my parents. I moved out when I was 18, went to college all on my own with no financial help from my family, got a job and left the country to be as far from them as possible. I'm on antidepressants for my PTSD, and luckily the therapists I've had since my teenage years have been nothing like that horrible woman, but it still upsets me deeply thinking about it. Oh God. I don't, so we'll see how well I explain it. People have recently started using nitrogen as an alternative to carbon in steel. It allows for a more oxidation-resistant steel, meaning theoretically less post-heat processing. I believe it also allows for a higher hardness than traditional carbon steels. The problem previously was the volatility of nitrogen not allowing enough saturation. However, adding chromium and pressurizing a nitrogen atmosphere have allowed manufacturers to get up to 3% mass. Unfortunately, the chromium required makes pretty much all high nitrogen steel stainless, which is always more difficult to work with. The reason there was a new article to read was that apparently through particle metallurgy and static pressure, people have made a more simple alloy like you can find in plain carbon steels. Which could mean a replacement of carbon in most steel, instead of just high chromium stainless. It probably won't, but it could. And I like that thought. This hits home for me. I have an appointment to see a new therapist on Friday. I have suspected PTSD over watching my 5-day-old son die back in July. The pain is unbearable and I'm terrified the therapist is going to judge me or struggle hearing the story. I'm so sorry for your loss. I hope your family, and the therapist, are doing better. Cringy edit, I'm so sorry I can't respond to everyone. I didn't expect my comment to get any attention. I appreciate all the condolences and well wishes. My family has a long healing journey ahead of us still, but we're doing what we can. If you want to help, or know someone else in a similar position, losing a baby in utero or not, please consider donating or referring them to Emma's Footprints. Emma's Footprints is a great organization in Erie, Pennsylvania who provides financial and emotional support to grieving parents who, specifically, have lost a baby. The organization paid for the entire funeral for our son. Please consider reaching out to them if you or someone you know is struggling mentally or financially. No one ever expects to lose a baby, or any child, at that. Life can be cruel, but it helps us grow and gives us the strength to help others. Thank you all for contacting me. One day at a time. And if you're going through a similar situation, there is hope and light at the end of the tunnel. Stay safe, my friends. I work in mental health and have worked in acute and crisis settings for the majority of my career. The most notable event I experienced was when a young person had presented with significant ongoing suicidal ideation who was dealing with a lot of shit. I spent a lot of time with them, mostly de-escalation and working out what the plan should be moving forward. One of their parents came in a little while later and I had the opportunity to speak to them about where their child was and what had been going on, with their consent of course. Midway through me trying to explain some of the psychological constructs and ways the parent could help, they said to me, "Is this going to take much longer? I have a show to go and watch." All I can say is, I never judge my patients, I have never walked their path or viewed the world through their eyes. But the people around them who perpetuate the suffering of the people I work with through ignorance, malice, and selfishness, I judge them. Edit, and a shameless one. I've tried to reply to as much as I could. I've enjoyed some of what I would assume is trolling and talking about some other people's experiences, as it's given me a chance to reflect on some of my own stuff. But I must go to bed. I'd like to ask one thing of anyone who reads this: remember that you can help, even just by asking how someone is or wishing them well. People who you think may be struggling and even people who aren't. This year has been hard on us all, and I appreciate all of you who have said that those in care services have difficult jobs, but we have all struggled this year. Please be as kind as you can to each other, and I hope we can all look forward to a good December and even better New Year. Edit 2. My use of the word judge needs some clarification. I do judge in some ways, it's hard not to with what I see, who I work with, and the situations they experience or have experienced. What I mean by not judging is that I do not allow my judgments to distort what I am seeing or how I am working, which will normally be to the benefit of the patient and those around them, trying to help them achieve their goals and meet their needs. Final edit. I didn't think this post would get as big as it has. And I cannot respond to every comment individually by any means. I'm sure the post will be getting less attention moving forward, but I just wanted to clarify some things. This parent, who many people have made multiple assumptions about, was not trying to redirect, deflect, or remove themselves from the situation by stating they had a show to watch. The show being something else people have assumed was a TV show. Remember, I've made the comment above in the context of a situation that lasted around 5 to 6 hours for me, but took you a few minutes to read. With everything that's going on right now, I wanted to make this post to let people know, those working in mental health have heard a lot, we don't judge you for how or what you're feeling, and we want to work with you to help you. I simply wanted to help in some way with a comment on the internet that I wrote in one go about an experience I have had. I know that the response to this has been overwhelmingly positive, but I would also like to say I did not mean to cause any offense or upset to anyone or claim that I am some sort of unachievable goal of non-judgment. Anyway, I'm going to try and forget about this now. My God, it's like you're describing my mother. She let me go to therapy a grand total of 2 times while I was depressed and suicidal at 17. The second time the therapist asked her to come in to talk to her about how I was feeling, and she started crying to him about how my feelings made her feel sad and how much it affected her. I never even cried in my sessions. Then he told her she might like to consider letting me go out with friends more and have a better social life, and then she took me home and told me I manipulated him into saying that to her. A few weeks later I tried to commit suicide, and her response was to take me out of therapy and off the medication because in her mind that was what caused my episode and not her and my father being pricks to me. Edit, Jesus Reddit. I did not expect all these replies. I am totally out of this situation and do not live with or speak to my parents anymore. I cut them off relatively recently and am working through it, but seeing the outpouring of stories, kindness, and love in this thread has truly made me feel heard and validated for the first time that she really was as bad as I remembered. Thank you for that, smiley face. Also wanna say if any of you guys need to talk, my inbox is open. I can't reply to every single one of these, but know I'm reading all of them and that I hope you're all better now. You deserve unconditional love and kindness. I'm a dude. I was brutally raped multiple times between the ages of 7 and 10. My one and only attempt at try to get help from a therapist was one of the most awful experiences of my life. I attempted to get help in my early 20s. Upon first going in, I was asked what had happened to me, after explaining a basic outline of the abuse. I could already see that she was very dismissive and seemed not to really believe me. She then asked about my relationship status. At the time I was in a long-term relationship with a woman who had 2 kids, boys. Upon finding this out, she immediately demanded the names and address of my girlfriend, names of the kids, and said she would be immediately getting in touch with social services to ensure that I wasn't abusing them. I can't put into words just how much that destroyed me mentally, that she could obviously see something in me that I couldn't see. That somehow she was certain that I would be an abuser. I started to cry. She told me to pull myself together. I also can't put into words the pathological visceral hatred I have for pedophiles and rapists. If I could get away with murdering them, I would. I would never ever inflict the absolute nightmare I went through on any child. I got up and left. I came very close to the edge of suicide that day. I also immediately ended the relationship because I couldn't deal with the thought that the kids might be at risk because of me. It's now 21 years later and I'm tearing up typing this. Because of that experience I have never sought therapist help again. I survive mentally, but it's not good survival. Edit. Wow. Just wow. I am absolutely blown away by the internet strangers who are sending love and care to me. I am currently alone, in the dark, in tears, reading all these replies. To answer a few questions. I'm in the UK. I heard she was fired a few years later after a patient of hers committed suicide and mentioned her therapy in the note he left. I am in a position where currently I'm in such a fragile, very heavily medicated, mental state that if I saw another therapist and got the same reaction, that I know my mind would break and I'd take my own life. Every day is a struggle to find reasons to stay alive. I'm sure I have PTSD as I feel the need to be armed with a knife constantly, despite being a big dude, 6 feet 4 inches, 110 kilograms, I sleep with a knife under my pillow. I often wake up screaming. I tend to be standoffish with everyone, deliberately keeping people at a distance. I know I'm a broken person. I've even avoided relationships with women with kids because I don't want my broken mental state to somehow affect those kids in any way. I have attempted suicide twice and both times I survived. I just want there to be a pill or operation where I could completely wipe out the past, even wipe me out, wake up and just have a new me, minus the depression, anxiety, fear, PTSD, crushing hatred of myself. It would be nice to wake up one day and actually be able to see some value in myself. I'd love to be married and be a dad, but currently I'm in a state where I can't ever see or allow that to happen. I'm too scared that my mental state would fuck up my wife and kids' lives. I can't allow that.